Hi everyone and welcome to Theme Park Worldwide and the latest video in our Future of series. In this video I'm going to be sharing my predictions and wish lists on the future of Chessington World of Adventures, a theme park located in Greater London here in the United Kingdom. Right then, so with these videos I always start off with talking about my predictions, the things that I think are likely to happen at some point in the future. I'm then going to move on to my wish list, the things that I would do at Chessington World of Adventures if I was in charge. And as always with these, I've got lots to talk about, so let's get straight in there with my predictions. So with Chessington, it is a family-based park, and over the past few years, they've actually been going around the park and regenerating lots of different areas. Some attractions have been removed, new rides have been brought in, and others have been rethemed. It's been a complete transformation of Chessington, and that seems to be ongoing. We know that this year they've got a brand new family drop tower that's going in the place of where Ramesses Revenge used to be, a former Huss top spin. That had come to the end of its life, and let's be honest, with that it didn't really fit in with the new target market for Chessington. The park is very much about family and themed experiences now, so I really feel like the new drop tower is a great move for them and will fit in, as much as I'm going to miss Ramesses. What I can see them doing is continuing this refurbishment process around the park. Now you've got to think, over the past 10 years or so, they've refurbished a lot of the areas now around Chessington, and there's only a couple of areas that haven't been touched really in the past 10 years. Go back, you know, that period of time, a decade, and the park was so different in many areas, but there's still some areas that still look very similar, and some bits that are outdated as well that I think will be getting updated. And so I can see the park possibly doing some updates around the Mexicana area at some point in the future. Of course, that's home to Scorpion Express. Now that was rethemed from the old Runaway Train a few years ago. However, they've still got Rattlesnake around there, which is becoming a more of an older ride now for the park. Possibly I could see that getting replaced with something else in the coming years, or maybe just a retheme and a refresh of the area, depending on the ride's lifespan and of course how it is maintenance wise. I do really enjoy Rattlesnake, and you've got to think it's also quite a compact ride, so it works great on that site that's kind of dug down a little bit into a pit. So if they did replace Rattlesnake with something in Mexicana, then you've got to think, you know, it would have to be quite small to fit on that area, and there's not much leeway room around that area. Let's be honest, the whole of Chessington's pretty compact. There's not lots of space for expansion, and hence why we do see some rides removed when they do need to put new things in, because they just don't have the space. And Chessington do have a lot of issues when it comes to planning applications and actually getting those passed. So that's something to bear in mind as well. And as always with these videos, I like to keep it very realistic, but definitely can see Mexico, possibly Land of the Dragons. Now you might be thinking, hang on a minute, like there's nothing wrong with it, and I agree. You know, at first look at Land of the Dragons, it's quite a nice themed area. Dragon's Fury, fantastic spinning coaster. I can't see that going anywhere, but I could possibly see them either retheming the area or just general upgrading it at some point in the future. Now we all know that Chessington likes bringing in IPs. That's something what they've done quite a bit. Look at the more recent additions, the Gruffalo River Ride Adventure, that was an IP what they put in. Room on the Broom, that's another IP what they brought to the park, and even with the Flying Jumbos that had the Alma's IP put onto there. So you know, Chessington do like putting in IP based attractions, so we could possibly see something like that happening around Land of the Dragons maybe in the future. You've got to think with that area, it is actually now one of the older areas at the park, as much as it might not seem like it, because Dragon's Fury still feels like a new ride, you know, with how it looks and how it rides. It's a great coaster, but considering a lot of the other areas in the park now have gone through upgrades and story changes and some complete rethemes, it's actually one of the older areas really now in terms of with that theme in the park. So as much as I do really like the quirky feel of it round there, I could possibly see some changes or upgrades coming in the future. All the play equipment round there also takes up quite a bit of space, so they could possibly put in a couple of new flat rides around there if that's something what they wanted to do at some point in the future. Now, of course, there's a ride what I need to talk about that is now getting quite old, 31 years old to be precise with this one, and that is Vampire, that dates back to 1990. Now, Vampire was manufactured by Aerodynamics. In 2001, they actually did an upgrade of the ride, and that was changing the trains and putting some new generation Vekoma trains on there. You used to actually sit in bats on there, and it was fantastic. fantastic. However, they decided to make that change, and of course it's kept the ride running for all these years. However, it does make me think, how long has Vampire got left? It saddens me to say it, I love Arrow coasters, and as much as, yes, you are riding Vekoma trains on an Arrow track, for me it's the nostalgia of it, and it's a great ride. It's still the signature coaster. Over 30 years later at Chessington, it's still the big ride for that park and the location of it. You look at early photos of Vampire and there was hardly any trees, and now look at it, the ride is in a forest. Now, my one concern with Vampire is how long it's got left, so I thought let's compare it with some other similar rides out there. You'll all be pleased to know that it's not actually the oldest of that type of ride out there. There's a couple that are still operating that were built before, such as Iron Dragon over at Cedar Point. That opened in 1987. Ninja, which is at Six Flags, that opened in 1988 at Magic Mountain. So you've got to think these rides are 2 or 3 years older than Vampire at Chessington. So I think really for this one, we need to keep our eyes peeled on them. And if we start to see them closing and getting replaced, then Vampire could be next. Of course, Vampire could come first. It all depends on the maintenance and the wear and tear, and mainly how it's been looked after. So that could be interesting. Quite a few of this older Arrow ride have been removed and closed at the parks. However, there is still a couple of older versions operating. So I don't think we've got to worry about Vampire yet, but I'm thinking more, you know, 3, 4, maybe 5 years from now, I can see the ride coming to the end of its life. And then it's a matter of they've got to get planning permission for something to go on there. They might not be able to move certain trees, and yeah, it could be a bit of a nightmare for them because it's a big space and it's a big ride. So, you know, if that did happen and it had to get replaced, then there's lots of different options that I could see them looking at for that. Maybe even going for something like a Vekoma family suspended coaster, which is pretty much now, if you wanted that type of ride, that is what you would buy, like Flight of the Pterosaur, for example, down in the Lost Kingdom at Paultons Park. That's a more modern, if you like, take on them older Arrow coasters from Vekoma, what they've done. So that could possibly happen, but it does sadden me to say it, but I do think Vampire, you know, it isn't going to last forever. These rides, they are machines at the end of the day, so it all depends how it's going to be looked after. But let's keep our eyes peeled over on the States and see what happens with them other older ones before we start thinking too much about Vampire. But it's certainly something to think about in the future. Now, along with that, I can also see the addition of some more IP based rides. Now, we all know, like I say, that the Gruffalo has been a big success for them, and just bringing in IPs is great from a marketing perspective, and I can actually see them doing that to some of the other areas. I mentioned Mexicana having some upgrades, maybe Land of the Dragons, possibly bringing in an IP. As much I much prefer original attractions, and I think that is the way to go, it wouldn't surprise me if we do see a few more IPs coming to Chessington, because that park seems to love IPs coming in. And well, Merlin do in general, don't they, at the moment, with all their parks? Alton Towers, Thorpe Park, Legoland, of course, but with Chessington, it seems like a real way they are going. However, some of the more original attractions that they've put in over the past few years and rethemes they've done, Tiger Rock, for example, that was a great retheme, not bringing in an IP. So, and it's the same with the Drop Tower this year, as far as we're aware, and it's an original attraction. So that is really good to see. Along with that, finally, in my predictions, is the installation of a new coaster. I do think it'll come, whether that's a replacement for Vampire in a few years' time, whenever that time comes, or in addition to Vampire, putting in something else. I can see them going for another coaster, because you've got to think Chessington is a busy park. If you go there on a weekend, it gets some big queues, and quite a few of the rides are quite low on the throughput. So I do think they will try and push for a new coaster in the next few years. Of course, with everything going on at the moment with COVID, that might delay them plans further. However, I do think they've got it in them to put another coaster in somewhere, and that is the big question. It is somewhere. We all know there's a big green piece of land opposite Dragon's Fury, what they haven't built on. Now, there's a lot of concern whether that can be built on and what can be put on there. It's one of them things, you know, it's quite a big plot of land. You could put a good coaster on there, but it's if they could, and obviously all the planning applications and issues that they've had over the past, you know, so that's something to think about. But I don't know particularly if they'd be able to put something on there. Along with that, there's not much other space around the park unless they did a few changes around to maybe fit a new coaster in. So possibly around the Pirates Cove, Tiny Truckers area, they could do some theming around there maybe, and do some changes to put a new coaster in. I'm not too sure, but if If not, you know, I can see them still installing some new family flat rides. There's quite a few places where you could slip in new flat rides if they needed to, and I imagine they wouldn't have too many issues on the planning front. Maybe up in Wild Asia there's a little bit of space for some more rides if they needed to, and just some other areas of the park where you can think there is space for some more flats. But if they could put in another coaster, if they could manage to find the room for it, what would I like to see them put in, or what do I think they might put in? Possibly a Mack launch coaster. Now, I'm not talking something like Icon at Blackpool Pleasure Beach in terms of a big thrill ride with intense launches and inversions. I'm thinking more along the lines of Slinky Dog Dash over at Disney's Hollywood Studios. Something like that they could run 3 or 4 trains, really high throughput family ride if they could get the space for it. If not, possibly an Intamin multi-dimensional coaster, basically 13 at Alton Towers with dark ride sections and outdoor space. That could be a great move for Chessington. Again, space dependent. Or even a water coaster. I've spoke a lot recently about water coasters, but that could be a great move for Chessington. It's something that, you know, would really fit in with their family audience at the park. So I'm not too sure with that one. Space does concern me at Chessington, and that's going to sort of extend now into my wish lists for the park. So I've gone through my predictions. Let's go through what I would do. Now, the first change that I would make at Chessington straight away if I was in charge is not put in a brand new ride. There's a bigger concern for me what needs sorting at Chessington, and that is the arrival experience. Now, I've mentioned quite a bit throughout this video that the park itself has quite a few issues when it comes to getting planning permission for new attractions. That's the same also for infrastructure. We know that Chessington have wanted to actually tarmac some of their car parks for quite a while. However, when it comes to getting permission from the local councils, they can't seem to grant it. So there seems to be some big issues regarding a lot of the land around Chessington. Why, when it's a massive tourist attraction and they need car parks, they need infrastructure, they shouldn't have as many issues in my opinion, but they do. So I would love to see them try and do the best they can to make that arrival experience better, whether that be some nice new entrance signage, the car parks, sort them out the best they can, and just keep pushing to try and get a better parking facility on there. The car park is awful, it really is. Now, I don't know if they can necessarily get that permission to tarmac, but at least putting down like the gravel sort of infrastructure would be nice instead of parking on grass. And I've seen it before down there at Halloween last year, cars getting stuck in the mud. It's a nightmare. The exit barriers for the car park, it all needs a refresh. Along with that, both of the entrances really need an overhaul as well, in my opinion. For what's got some great theming, both of the entrances are pretty poor in my opinion. It just needs some general work doing to them. Now, you look at the entrance down towards the hotels, that one is just so outdated now with all the brickwork on there. And what I would actually do is try and relocate that closer to the hotels, move it round a little bit and create a bit of a new pathway in, which would actually allow for quite a bit of space there where that entrance is to put in a new attraction. Now, again, this is all planning dependent, but I would love to see them put in a new dark ride around that section of the park and kind of move the entrance across a little bit and create a new dark ride on that space. Now, that could be a fantastic move for them. I'd love to see a trackless dark ride. Don't particularly know the theme that I'd go for with this at this stage, but I think a trackless dark ride would be a great move for them all around the sort of lodge gate area. Move that round, but definitely upgrade both of the entrances and infrastructure first before I'd even think about putting a new ride in into the park. But yeah, I'd definitely try and reconfigure the layout around that section because I feel like they could just do more with the space around there. Definitely, possibly move a few of the animal exhibits around by the sea life area, move them around a little bit just to create a bit more space around there and create something a bit more grand for an entrance with a possible new dark ride on there. Now, I've already spoke about this coaster, but I think out of the coasters that I mentioned, the best one that I would put into the park will be an Intamin multi-dimensional coaster. I think that would be a great investment for them at Chessington. I really do. Something like that with dark ride sections, that could possibly even be the dark ride that I mentioned. Instead of a trackless ride, go for something like that. Park coaster, park dark ride could be brilliant. Keep it low, but have it quite action-packed with a lot going on. Maybe a backwards section would be fantastic for that. And And then in general, it would be less IP and more original attractions. Now, we all know that IP does bring people in, especially in a family-based park. I feel like IPs do more in a family park than they do a thrill park. However, I think Chessington needs to be taking a bit of a look at what Paultons Park are doing with Tornado Springs. That's hopefully going to be opening this year, fingers crossed. But with Tornado Springs, what the park have done is created this amazing area, and that's the same with Lost Kingdom there. They had a fantastic IP that they've still got with Peppa Pig, and then they've took the funds from that, if you like, to invest in the rest of the park and the rest of the brand, and I'd love to see Chessington go more down that route. Likewise, we have seen some really original attractions like the Drop Tower that's come in for this year, which looks fantastic. Zoofari, that was a great original attraction in my opinion. And some of the existing rides, you know, we had that retheme from Dragon Falls into Tiger Rock, the upgrade to Toon Blaster, what they did. So we know they've got some great original rides. I'd like to see a bit more of that and a little bit less IP, in my opinion. But there we go. They're my predictions and wish list. With Chessington, again, it's a hard park because there's not much space to expand. I think with Chessington, they struggle really more than Alton Towers when it comes to getting permission for things. So I really do hope that Chessington can keep investing and keeping things fresh. They're going to need to compete, especially if the London Resort does end up happening. Chessington could be hit badly by that. So they're going to need to really move forward and think about infrastructure and making some new investments in the future. They've kept things fresh over the past sort of 10 years. They've been going around the park and investing in areas, which is great to see. And hopefully that's going to continue, because out of all the Merlin parks, I think that Chessington probably looks the most fresh in terms of with the areas going around and doing bits of TLC. They've done some really good stuff. As much as I wouldn't have done some of the changes what they have, at least they've not just let it stay stagnant. They've kept investing, put some fresh stuff in, but it is time for a new coaster at some point at Chessington. Let me know your thoughts down below in the video comments. I would love to know what you think Chessington will do and should do in the future. And along with that, check out the other videos in this Future Of series. It's a bit of fun. I don't have a clue what they're going to do. However, I do like to try and predict the best that I can and also keep it realistic as well with my wish list for them. So thanks for watching Theme Park Worldwide. Brand new videos to enjoy on the channel here every single day. And that leaves me with one final thing to say. Get out there and keep on riding. See you all in the next video.